Good morning, our dear viewers. This is Senior 2 Chemistry by Rhoda Muganda, and our topic of study today is atomic structure. I am sure you would be wondering, what is an atom? What does it mean when we say an atom? So in our today's lesson, we will get to discover all that, and we want to look at the following objectives. Our first objective in today's study is to define an atom. And our second objective in today's lesson will be to describe the structure of an atom. In our third objective, we should be able to draw the general structure of an atom. And our fourth objective for today's lesson is to state the particles that actually make up an atom. And lastly, our fifth objective should be to be able to state which charges each particle actually carries in an atom. Our dear viewers, most of our learners confuse the particles that make up an atom. But let's first begin with looking at the definition of an atom. If we are to define an atom, I would like us to look at an atom in this format. Do we all see this leaf? When you look at this leaf would actually represent an atom. I have picked this leaf from a tree. It is part of a tree. However, when you look at it, it's divided into smaller sections. In that case, when you look at the smaller sections that we call leaflets in biology, you'll realize that these smaller sections here stand for the different atoms in a particular element. So meaning that this leaf represents an element of which each of them has got an atom. So these leaflets stand for the different atoms in an element. Now, let's look at our definition. In chemistry, how would we define an atom? We would say an atom is the smallest particle of an element that takes part in a given chemical reaction. Just as we saw this leaf, it has got small particles that we call atoms. So meaning that this whole leaf stands for an element. Okay. So if we say an atom is the smallest particle of an element that takes part in a chemical reaction, we should also be able to know that all atoms of a particular element are identical. What do we mean? If we say they are identical, meaning that they are the same. Okay? So the other thing that we need to see is, if they are identical, then what makes up an element? We would say an element contains atoms. We want to look at an example. For example, when we look at sodium, I am sure you have already seen sodium as an element. And the formula of sodium is Na, coming from natrium. Sodium, we would assume that it has this shape. In every sodium in every sodium metal or element, there are different sodium atoms. Just as we saw the leaf. So we would have sodium, sodium, sodium. So meaning that every element has got its own atoms. If you took another element, for example, potassium. Potassium would have several potassium atoms. So meaning that every element has got its own atoms. Okay? Now, besides this, we want also to look at the shape of an atom. How does an atom look like? The first thing that we have in mind is that an atom is actually spherical in shape. Now, I want us to look at an atom in this format. when you look at a family starts with father and mother. A family starts with the father and mother. As the father and mother produce, they will form children. Shall put our children, depending on which family. Every family is different in its own way. So in that case, an atom is compared to a family. A family has got a father and a mother. A family has got children. Okay? Now, these children vary depending on which family. So we shall take this family as our atom. We have said an atom is spherical in shape. And then, within the family, we have said there is a small circle here. We will say that is daddy and mommy's bedroom. And that small circle is the one we call the nucleus. Okay? And then, that small region is the one we are calling the nucleus. The next thing that we shall see is that every nucleus in an atom is surrounded by a circular path known as shells. I have drawn it right here. We can add on another one. We can add on another one. It has got circular path called shells or energy levels. So, in that case, if we say every family has got a nucleus where father and mother stay, that is now the bedroom. The next thing we have seen that every atom has got circular path that we call energy levels or that we call shells. Okay? Now, the other thing that we want to see, what appears in the nucleus or what appears in daddy and mommy's bedroom. Okay? What appears in daddy and mommy's bedroom is actually daddy and mommy. What we are saying, father and mother. However, in terms of an atom, we would say within the nucleus, we will have what we call protons and neutrons. We will have protons and neutrons, meaning that the protons and neutrons now will be represented by father and mother. And then outside here, this circular path that we are calling energy levels or that we are calling shells will actually represent our children. So in that case, daddy and mommy will produce children and then they will rotate around, and these are the ones that we are calling the energy levels. So in that case, as we are looking at an atom, I want us to bear in mind that structure of a family, okay? So I think we can be able to see it. So we shall have the nucleus, we shall have the energy levels, okay? And these energy levels are very organized. Just like when mommy and daddy produce children, they don't produce all at once, but they produce them in bits. So in that case, when you look at that structure of an atom, this is what we are able to see. The first energy level is the inner one nearer the nucleus. That is the first energy level. Then the second energy level comes just outside the nucleus. So we can say this is our second energy level. And then our third energy level, and so on and so on. Of course, we know every family varies in size. So we may have very many children. Another family might have only 2 children. So in that case, within this nucleus is now where we shall have the protons, and then we shall also have the neutrons. Okay? So that is what an atom looks like. we say it is spherical, as we have already seen. Now, the next thing that we want to look at is which particles actually make up an atom. I believe you already have an idea. From this structure here, I am sure we have already gotten an idea. When we look at the particles that make up an atom, there are basically 3 of them. The first particle that we talk about is the protons. The first particle that makes up an atom is the protons. And these protons have got a charge. So let's say particles. So one, we have the protons. And these protons carry a charge. We shall also put a charge against them that is positive charge. The second particle that makes up an atom, we shall describe them later, is the electrons. These electrons also carry a charge, and that is negative charge. And we shall put in bracket minus. And then lastly, the third particle is the neutrons. Now, when you come to the neutrons do not have any charge. The neutrons are not charged, so we shall say they are neutral. They do not carry any charge. So in this case, since we had already looked at the structure of an atom, okay, we say it is spherical. In the center, it has got the nucleus, and outside it has got the energy levels, which are made up of certain particles. Now, our interest is to be able to know where do we locate these particles. Let's just have it here. Okay, so we have already described the structure, and we said it has got energy levels. So these are the 3 particles: the protons and the electrons, and then the neutrons. Let's see, where do we place each of them? In the center, where we have the nucleus, is where we have the protons and the neutrons. So we are going to label these as protons. These are neutrons. And then, when we look at outside the nucleus, is where now we have the electrons. We shall use letter E to represent the electrons. Each atom has got different number of neutrons, different number of protons, and different number of electrons. So in that case, outside the nucleus, or outside the nucleus of an atom, is where we have these electrons. And remember, we've said they are negatively charged. So here we shall put a minus so that we can be able to remember. And then inside the nucleus of an atom is where we have the protons, which are positively charged. We also have the neutrons, and these ones do not carry any charge. So those are the particles that make up an atom. And that is how we would represent them on a particular atom. In that case, one should not be able to confuse this, because the protons are positive, the electrons are negative, the neutrons are not charged. And we have also seen where they are located. Okay? Alright, so members, since we have already seen this, now our next point should be looking at how we can describe the protons. What are they? What are electrons? What are neutrons? So in our next meeting, we should be able to actually look at each of these particles. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.